Confucianism was once a massively popular religion in China and other parts of East Asia, and even though the religion has faded greatly in popularity, the influence it has had on Asian culture and even world culture is still clear to see. Confucianism started as a simple set of philosophies for becoming a better human being, but these teachings quickly grew in popularity, and by the Han Dynasty, Confucianism had become the state-sponsored religion of Imperial China, which it would remain for hundreds of years. This meant the word of Confucianism had a direct impact or influence on many aspects of life, but today I'll be focusing on the impact Confucianism had on art during this era and even into the present day. The influence Confucianism had on art during its height can be compared to the influence Christianity had on Rome during the Renaissance era. While Confucianism was not expressed as directly through art as Christianity was during the Renaissance, the values of Confucianism and the overall mood are still very clear to see. Confucians followed what's known as Li, which were societal guidelines for the time, and they placed heavy importance on social order, positive relationships, and respect for nature. Unlike other religions, Confucianism did not have elaborate stories of salvation or an afterlife, but rather focused on simple values that were meant to improve the lives of the individual and the rest of society. The themes of Confucian art were also very simple. While the works themselves were also often very detailed and beautiful, they reflect the simple lives of the Chinese people during this time. As I stated, Confucianism emphasizes societal order, or each individual fitting into their place. And this is also a very common theme in Confucian art. Many pieces of art from this period depict men and women in busy settings, all seemingly completing a task, like for example, the painting titled His Deception by Mao Yanshao. In this painting, there is no focus point, but rather many parts that come together to form something beautiful, with individuals scattered all across the painting. This is similar to the vision of Confucianism. The next focus point I discussed was the importance of relationships to Confucians. This can be seen very commonly in their art as well. Paintings commonly depict individuals gathered around interacting with one another, teachers teaching a student, and family members spending time together. For example, the popular painting Their Night Revels by Han Zizé depicts a group of individuals gathered around a table, enjoying drinks while listening to music and conversating with one another. The last point I mentioned was the importance of Confucianism placed on nature. They believed nature was valuable because nature provided them with everything they needed to survive, and therefore they respected nature as an integral part of life. Many works from this time depicted beautiful scenes of nature, such as crops growing, animals grazing, and water flowing, all of which were essential to provide sustenance to the Chinese citizens. A good example of this is the painting known as the Rainbow Bridge, which depicts a bustling bridge over a river with many fishing boats. This gives the viewer a very good feel of how important waterways were to their thriving society. Although the practices of Confucianism have long since been abandoned, it continues to have an influence on modern Chinese art. One of the most noticeable things when visiting China is its beautiful architecture, with its beautifully symmetric designs, elaborate gardens, and ostentatious detail. But many people do not realize that this style was birthed from Confucianism. Chinese architecture is very commonly symmetrical, and aside from this fact that this is very visually appealing, it was also meant to reflect the importance of order in Confucianism, with all the buildings being very ordered. The presence of gardens surrounding these detailed buildings can also be accredited to Confucianism. As I stated earlier, Confucians had a great deal of respect for nature, so they chose to build these gardens so they could better appreciate it as well as benefit from what nature had provided them. Finally, Chinese architecture is often incredibly detailed, with buildings that look like they are fit for a king, and this was exactly what was intended. During the Confucian era, part of fitting into the social order was the acknowledgement of a hierarchy. Individuals of a higher class often wanted to show off their status, and one of the ways they did this was having extremely detailed and ornate buildings built. These extraordinary buildings were a very clear sign of wealth and power at the time. All of these features are now a staple in Chinese architecture, and they can all be traced back to Confucianism. So as you can see, Confucianism had a very direct influence on art during its era, and even though Confucianism has been largely forgotten, its values have been immortalized in the art that it has inspired.